It was really a wonderful moment of our lives. I mean, my life and Marcello's life in this season.
He loved someone Hollywood never allowed him to hold. That was the shocking sentence Sophia Loren revealed at the age of 91 when she spoke about George Peppard, the man the public once viewed as a cold, difficult gentleman constantly surrounded by endless controversies. But Loren said, "You've only seen the surface. The truth is far more complicated." With that one sentence, the secrets Hollywood had buried for decades suddenly rose to the surface layer by layer. Loveless marriages no one ever understood, a hidden relationship concealed in the shadows, nights drowned in alcohol and smoke just to forget himself, and decisions that seemed impulsive but were actually driven by fear, hurt, and silent sacrifices he never explained. So what lies behind the man Hollywood always misunderstood, and what made Sophia Loren choose to reveal everything after more than half a century of silence? Let us begin the journey of peeling back the life of George Peppard, from his darkest secrets to the pain he carried until his final days. 1. He wasn't avoiding women, he was running. That was the sentence Sophia Loren once sighed as she recalled his youth. It is hard to believe that a handsome, strong, wildly admired man like Peppard carried a secret big enough to haunt him for life. But those who witnessed his early years in New York theater understood Peppard wasn't avoiding women out of arrogance. His heart already belonged somewhere no one dared to reach. Back in New York, after long rehearsal sessions, Peppard would disappear from his castmates and quietly slip into the dim corners of Greenwich Village. Curious colleagues who followed him discovered he always stopped at a small bar where a saxophone played like the Confessions of Lost Souls. There, Peppard always sat with Edwin Hale, a powerful Broadway writer, a man with sad eyes that seemed to understand everything. No one saw them act intimate, not even a touch. But the way they sat in silence together, occasionally exchanging a brief glance, made onlookers feel they had stumbled upon a secret that wasn't meant to be found. A waiter once said that simply observing the distance between their hands on the table was enough to understand they were trying to hold on to something they were not allowed to keep. One evening during Broadway's final rehearsals, a stage doorman passed backstage and saw Peppard standing in the faded yellow light while Edwin placed his hand on George's wrist. Just a gentle, soft gesture, an apology for having to live in the shadows. Peppard tightened his hold ever so slightly, but when footsteps echoed, they pulled away so quickly it looked as if they were strangers. The doorman later said it was one of the rare times he saw Peppard tremble, not from fear, but from having to suppress something the world of that era considered forbidden. Years later, when Peppard secured his first major Hollywood contract, his life changed instantly. The studio didn't just manage his career, they engineered his emotions, his image, his public presence. They arranged for him to appear with stunning young actresses to create the image of a cold but irresistible leading man. And within that constructed image, his first marriage began. Everyone assumed he had found the woman he loved, but his wife revealed another story. In the first weeks, George was gentle and thoughtful, but after a few months, I felt like he was trying to love me, trying to play the role of a husband. His heart was somewhere far away. The most dangerous moment came on a foggy morning when paparazzo Sheldon Ricks accidentally photographed Peppard stepping out of Edwin's apartment. Coat unbuttoned, hair tousled face, carrying both relief and fear of being discovered. That photo nearly destroyed everything. The studio intervened immediately, paying a large sum to buy the roll of film before it reached the press. After that incident, Peppard lived in constant caution, never looking at anyone too long, never staying alone with a man in a closed room, never showing up anywhere Edwin might be. Their relationship existed only in fragments in dark corners where no one could see. His later marriages became a long chain of desperate attempts. He married 5 times, but each marriage was like a coat he wore to escape the cold for a moment. Then, months later, the coat would feel too tight, suffocating, and he would escape again. All his wives said the same thing: George was kind, but his eyes were always somewhere else. He didn't betray me with another woman, he just didn't love me. A friend recalled a party in 1964 where Peppard was so drunk he dropped his glass after accidentally calling his wife by Edwin's name. The room froze. Peppard turned away, but his shoulders shook. The friend said, "That was the only time I saw George break." On set, Peppard kept a growing distance from women. Polite kind, but never letting anyone close, not even for on-screen chemistry. Female co-stars couldn't understand why he avoided any hint of intimacy. They didn't know Peppard was trying to play the ideal man in real life, and that role drained him more than any film he ever made. And then, like every emotion suppressed too long, everything collapsed. 5 marriages broken. No cheating, no scandal, no specific wrongdoing. Only one truth, simple but cruel. Peppard could not love them because his heart belonged to someone he was never allowed to name under sunlight. A love denied, turning his entire life into a journey of running from himself. 2. George didn't drink to get drunk. He drank to stop existing. It sounds dramatic, but anyone who witnessed his rise and his rapid fall knew it wasn't an exaggeration. Peppard became addicted to alcohol and cigarettes not out of vanity, but because they were the only anesthetics strong enough to dull a pain he was never allowed to speak of. At the peak of his career, people often saw Peppard holding a drink in the early morning when the crew had barely set up the equipment. After finishing a scene, he would immediately walk off camera toward his familiar wooden chair and light his 15th or 20th cigarette of the day. People assumed he was coping with work stress, but those who knew him said Peppard was addicted to forgetting. With every burning cigarette, every sip of liquor, he blurred the image of the man he loved but could never acknowledge. In those brief moments, he didn't have to run, didn't have to pretend to be a flawless masculine icon, didn't have to guard himself from the world. A crew member once recalled a morning he would never forget. It was around 1963. Peppard had just finished a final take when he collapsed into his chair, filled a glass with strong liquor, downed it in seconds, and murmured to himself, "I don't drink for joy. I drink so I won't remember who I am." The entire crew fell silent. No one asked questions. No one dared look into his eyes that held an ocean of darkness no one could reach. Alcohol made him impulsive, emotionally unstable. Cigarettes weakened his lungs day by day. But every inhale, every drink was a fragile curtain shielding him from the fear of exposure. Not exposure to others, exposure to himself. And whenever that curtain thinned, whenever clarity became too sharp, his anger and turmoil erupted with greater force. That is why his fights with directors, contract disputes, or sudden withdrawals from films always occurred during his heaviest drinking periods. Outsiders said he was difficult, arrogant, wanting everything his way. But those closest to him knew Peppard wasn't fighting directors or studios, he was fighting himself. Fighting to hold on to what little composure he had left amid endless nights of drinking and days stretched thin like fraying ribbons. His departure from sands of the Kalahari was the clearest example. Newspapers claimed he stormed off set uncooperative, causing massive losses. But the truth was far darker. The night before, Peppard had been drinking nonstop. He arrived with bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, unable to form a complete sentence. His closest assistant said that day, Peppard looked like a man collapsing from the inside, unable to continue acting while his mind was shredded by alcohol, fear, and memories he tried to forget, but never could. The lawsuit followed. His reputation suffered. But those who stood beside him knew George didn't quit the film. He simply had no strength left. In the years that followed, Peppard was labeled difficult, temperamental, unstable. But that was only the surface. Beneath it, he was sinking into loneliness, fear of exposure, and wounds buried so deep they rusted and ate away at him piece by piece. And the cruelest moments were the sentences he whispered only when drunk. One night after drinking until he could barely stand, Peppard leaned against a doorframe, breathing heavily, then whispered into the dark, "If only I could live as myself, just once." The friend who heard it said he had never known a sentence so heartbreaking from a man as beautiful and strong as Peppard. A short sentence, yet it contained his whole life, a life of running, pretending, carrying burdens, and slowly destroying himself to avoid facing the truth that he was never allowed to love the way his heart wished. 3. Sophia. Loren George wasn't unkind. He was just hurting so much he didn't want anyone to touch him. "If there is one man who has stayed with me for 70 years, it is George Peppard," Sophia Loren said in one of her final interviews. And not because of his looks, his fame, or the scandals people pinned on him, but because of the sadness in his eyes, a sadness no other star had. She paused, her aged eyes looking into the distance. George wasn't cruel. He was hurting so much he didn't want anyone to touch him. Loren first met Peppard in the late 60s at an awards ceremony in Rome. That night, she stood on the red carpet while flashes burst like fireworks, and among the crowd she noticed something odd. Peppard wasn't smiling. Hollywood actors always wore professional smiles at every event, but Peppard was different. He stood motionless, hands clasped, his gaze not toward the cameras, but down at the ground, as if trying to hide from the very celebration he was attending. Loren recalled that when she stepped closer, Peppard only gave a slight nod and immediately avoided her eyes. "I knew right away he was hiding something," she said. "Not a professional secret, but a personal pain." At the gala that night, while other stars raised glasses, laughed loudly, and told amusing stories, Peppard sat alone at a corner table. No one dared approach because people feared he might explode at any moment. But that only made Loren more curious. "I didn't see a difficult man," she said. "I saw someone struggling with something far too large." The chance to understand him better came a year later when both were cast in a European project. Peppard had entered a strange phase, more famous than ever yet, more unstable than ever. Rumors on set said he argued, constantly skipped shoots on some days, and arrived with tired, bloodshot eyes on others. No one understood the root of these outbursts. They simply labeled him arrogant, hard to please, temperamental. Loren did not think so. She had seen many stars collapse, but in Peppard she saw something deeply human, something true. The story unfolded on a quiet afternoon in the makeup room, an afternoon that completely changed Sophia Loren's view of him. When the crew took a break, Peppard walked into the room, placed his coat on a chair, and hurried into the hallway to take a call. At that moment, a paper slipped from his coat pocket and slid to the floor. Sophia, sitting nearby and assuming it was a few script pages, bent down to pick it up. But when she turned the paper over, she froze. It was not a script. It was a medical report. Restricted heavy exertion, pulmonary parenchymal damage, high risk of complications. Sophia said her heart felt squeezed. "I've seen thousands of medical reports in my life, but that one was different. It was the kind of paper any actor fears to see." Peppard returned just as Loren was looking at it. His gaze froze, his face drained. For a very brief moment, his shoulders dropped, as if the armor he wore every day had fallen to the floor. But only for that single moment. Immediately after, Peppard forced a stiff smile and said, "It's just a cold." Loren did not reply. She simply folded the paper, placed it back in his hand, and softly said, "George, I know." What followed was strange. Instead of relief at being understood, Peppard stepped back, snatched the paper from her, and walked away. "I don't want anyone's pity," he said. "Never mention this again." Sophia said she watched his retreating figure and understood this was a man hurt so often that even concern caused him pain. After that day, Loren watched more closely. She noticed Peppard often clearing his throat in scenes, but pretending it was part of the character. She saw him lean against walls when the lights went down, adjusting his breathing bit by bit so no one would notice. She saw him arrive on set earlier than anyone else, not to prepare, but to buy a few minutes to fight his breathlessness alone before others appeared. Then came the day Hollywood said Peppard exploded. He walked out of a tense shoot, slammed his script on the table, and argued fiercely with the director. The press described it as the behavior of an unstable star. But to Sophia, the truth was entirely different. Before leaving, Peppard had to sit down, clutch his chest, and gasp like someone surfacing from deep water. He looked into the mirror, his face aged 10 years, and whispered so softly Loren had to strain to hear, "I can't go on. I can't breathe." She understood he wasn't abandoning the film. He simply could not continue. He could not force himself through another scene. But Peppard feared pity, feared Hollywood. Discovering his weakness, feared his career being snuffed out like so many before him. So he chose to be misunderstood. He chose to be labeled difficult, arrogant, unprofessional. He chose scandal over pity. The climax came with the story that he was fired from the series Dynasty. Headlines shouted that he had been replaced for bad behavior. The audience believed it. The studio remained silent. But Loren said George wasn't replaced. He chose to leave. A week before the decision, Peppard arrived on set unsteady. Sophia wasn't part of the series, but a crew friend called her George isn't well. He coughed all night, he can't breathe. Days later, he staged a public spat with a producer large enough to give the studio a pretext to remove him without exposing what lay behind. Sophia also revealed a detail never reported by the press. Peppard intentionally yielded the Dynasty role to a younger actor, someone he believed had greater potential. "He can go farther than I can," Peppard told his manager. "I don't want to drag anyone down with me." No one expected that the man labeled a temperamental star could perform such an act of kindness. Later, at a private gathering of artists, Loren asked Peppard bluntly, "Why do you build that cold wall?" Peppard stood by the window, his back to her, and said in a hoarse voice, "If I let anyone touch me, I'll break." The remark left her silent for a long time. "He wasn't cold," Loren said. "He built armor to protect the most fragile part inside. And because no one could see that inside, they thought he was a bad man." Loren closed the interview with a line that plunged the room into silence. George never deserved to be misunderstood. He was desperately trying to be himself, but was never allowed to. 4. The man who left behind an unfulfilled promise. At the end of his life, when Hollywood's lights had dimmed and the applause of former years only echoed in memory, George Peppard lived alone in a small house in North Hollywood on the quiet Ventura Lane. The house bore none of the breath of a great star: a worn armchair, a messy bookshelf, and a thin curtain over a southeast-facing window. But every neighbor who glanced inside said the same thing. Every night he stands there as if waiting for someone to appear from that dark road. Mrs. Edith Harper, who lived 3 houses down, remembered Peppard standing by the window each winter evening in 1994. He stood straight, motionless, his hand on the window frame as if keeping himself from falling. She told the Los Angeles Evening News in 1999. When I asked what he was looking at, he answered one line as soft as a breath, "I'm waiting for a promise that was never kept." About a month before Peppard's death, UCLA sent a nurse named Maria Alvarez to care for him at home. Maria was the first to hear Peppard's quiet nightly words whispers, as if speaking to his own past. She said Peppard did not fear death. He feared not having enough time to fix something. One night, he took my hand and said, "The scariest thing isn't death. It's leaving someone to live with the feeling of abandonment." That sentence haunted Maria for years. In the final weeks of April 1994, Peppard often muttered one phrase when exhausted, "I should have come back. I hurt that person too much." Maria did not know who that person was. She asked, but Peppard did not answer. He only closed his eyes and turned his head toward the window, the one place that still held light in the dimming house. On May 8, 1994, Peppard died in a treatment room at UCLA Medical Center. The press ran a brief notice, "George Peppard dies of lung disease." No public funeral. Hollywood, busy with new faces, felt a moment of sorrow and then moved on. But in Dearborn, where he was interred at Northview Cemetery, something strange began. On May 8, 1995, exactly 1 year after his death, the cemetery caretaker found a bouquet of white roses placed before Peppard's grave. No card, no signature, no trace. He thought it was a fan. But in 1996, the bouquet reappeared. Then 1997, 1998, 1999. Always the same white flowers, no name placed at dawn. In the spring of 2000, during an unusually cold morning, the caretaker decided to wake at 4 a.m. to watch. When the fog was heavy, he saw a figure enter the cemetery through the east gate. The person walked very slowly, as if each step weighed more than the years behind him. A long gray coat, a dark scarf around the neck, a hat pulled low over the face. Yet the posture was striking, straight, solitary, and unexpectedly familiar. The figure knelt at Peppard's grave, laid the white roses on the stone, and stood very still for a long time. No bowing, no prayer, no hands clasped, just standing there as one would look at a life they had lost. Then the figure spoke, a voice nearly soundless, yet in that stillness, it cut the fog like a blade. "You waited for me too long, and I have been late my whole life." The caretaker wanted to approach, but the figure turned and walked away. He did not look back, hesitate. He simply walked straight into the rising white mist and vanished as if never having existed. When the first article about the event ran in the Detroit Free Press in 2001, the headline read, "Mysterious Man Remembers George Peppard at Sunrise." The story stayed on the front page for 1 day, then was removed for unclear reasons. But the caretaker never regretted telling his tale. "I don't know who he was," he said, "but I knew that look. It was the look of someone who loved too deeply, too truly, and too late." From 2001 to 2007, the mysterious man continued to appear each year. No change of clothing, no change of time, no change of flowers. People whispered that he was the one Peppard had waited for all his life, the person Peppard never had a chance to apologize to embrace again, or to speak a final word to. Peppard once said on set a line that many took as odd. "The audience only sees me in my roles. No one sees me outside of them." But after his death, people understood the rest of the sentence he never dared to speak aloud, because in real life, I am someone no one was allowed to know. And perhaps the truest thing left behind by George Peppard is not Hollywood, Not his roles, not the rumors or scandals, but the bouquet of white roses placed at dawn, where a nameless, shapeless love that never lived continued quietly, more real than his life. The story of George Peppard is not only the tale of a brilliant Hollywood star, but the tale of a man trapped between light and shadow, between duty and heart, between what he had to do and what he wanted to do. From marriages meant to hide himself, nights of drinking to forget pain outbursts, to conceal weakness, to the white roses placed at dawn for many years, all together paint the final portrait of a man who never lived as his true self. George Peppard left behind many roles, many memories, and much screen glory. But the most beautiful, deepest, and unforgettable thing is not in any film. It is in the solitary silhouette at the window each night. It is in the whisper, "I should have come back." It is in the hands that touch the gravestone at sunrise. And it is in a love never allowed to become reality. Perhaps the one thing George Peppard desired more than fame was one chance to live true to his heart. And in the end, though, no one knows that person's name or what promises were exchanged or why they were parted for 30 years. Just seeing the white bouquet at dawn is enough for people to understand. This is not a Hollywood legend. This is the story of two people, one who waited a lifetime and one who arrived so late that the promise was never fulfilled. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Do you think the mysterious man was the one Peppard waited for all his life? And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss other hidden stories behind the glamour of Hollywood legends. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next video.